All right. Well, we are live. I think LinkedIn is a minute or two behind us. Checking on that. Folks should start trickling in any minute. Glenn, I'm getting bad feedback on your end. Let's see. So stream has started. LinkedIn has not kicked in yet. There we go. All right. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll wait for a couple of folks to join in. And looks like we've got two folks thus far. So welcome, everybody, all two of you. As folks start to trickle in, and Glenn, I still have bad feedback on your end. I'm not sure if it's, I guess if you're able to mute while I talk and vice versa, that might help. Hard with the banter, but we'll make it work. All right, well, Glenn, I'll go back and forth and I'll mute on my end. Modern day technology, as you would expect, working flawlessly. But as we have you guys join in on our LinkedIn Live session, we certainly appreciate you spending a couple minutes. If you have questions, please feel free to throw them in the LinkedIn chat or on YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. We have a couple of questions from folks that we will run through in a couple of minutes. I think first and foremost is really just talking a little bit about what's going on, predominantly in manufacturing distribution, as we're seeing with our NetSuite customers. It has been a whirlwind over the last 2 months. I don't think that's going to be slowing down by any means. We do have Avalara in one of their tariff specialists joining us in our next LinkedIn Live. So we're super excited for that. We'll make sure everybody is aware of what we're going to be sharing, timeline, what to expect, predominantly in food and beverage, health and beauty. I think that will be very informative. They also have a Trade Talk Tuesday session, which we're happy to share the link with. Good to be in the loop. Right now, as we have seen, food and beverage, health and beauty, manufacturing, distribution, optimal efficiency to offset super tight profit margins, fluctuating demand, management of perishable inventory, really making sure you're reporting everything in NetSuite is super tight for clear real-time visibility. Coordination with suppliers and distributors is more pertinent than ever. A lot of highly dynamic changes and trends, evolving consumer expectations, coordination with that global supply chain is paramount. I will stop talking. Glenn, anything you'd like to share, kind of what you're seeing over the last 2 months, what's changing?
I think it's just the uncertainty around, what is going to happen and not necessarily long-term, because I think, I was with some friends yesterday. One of the gentlemen owns a distribution business, and he's not as worried about the long-term prognostication, I think, because I think it'll all settle out eventually. It's more like you and I were talking just the other day, like there's 3 days of 25% tariff that have to be collected now. And how people need to track or report on that. And then further, what's the implication? So how to, businesses thrive, and this has been true since medieval times with the way money lending and certain things flowed through certain countries simply because there was stability. And I think that's the bigger question is how do we know, how do businesses plan for this? And unfortunately, right now, there's no definitive silver bullet. So I think it'll be very interesting. And I think customers are you're going to start to see preemptive price increases based on expectations. And customers need to understand what the impact to their margins going to be. So some what if analysis and planning and contingency planning around how do we enact this?
Mhm.
Is it dynamic pricing based on when an order is placed, or is it we're preemptively going to raise prices or lock in, contracted rates, which still doesn't help the tariff side of things, or overbuying inventory potentially right now. I know some folks are undertaking that as a strategy to alleviate potential for tariffs and other taxes to come into play for that. So, there's a variety of strategies, and obviously each supply chain is a little bit different depending on where you're sourcing from, timing, different things like that. So, yeah, it's a dynamic minefield out there to say the least. So,
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've got a couple of questions starting to come in. Glenn, first question for you. It's a long one. Buckle up. Um, this one is from uh, Dr. Rick Sanchez. So, how do I create an invoice with 2 due dates? So, hi, the way we sell our products has some complex billing. For example, we ship the product and the payment terms are as follows: 50% by the end of the month, then 50% net 90. I tried using billing schedules, but it just creates 2 invoices for half the amount. Is there a way to create one invoice that has 50% due on one date, but displays the whole amount? And then the second invoice has the total, what has been paid, and how much is due now.
there's a couple of ways potentially to do this, and I've by no means got like a definitive answer. I think you could customize the sales order form to print a pro forma invoice. We do this a lot of times with customers with the billing schedule attached to that. Conversely, you could create the 2 invoices, but then group them together in invoice grouping for template presentation. So you will have 2 invoices on the back end, but this is really about customer presentation, or at least the way I view it, because it all ties to one order, but the invoice is the presentation and the payment schedule so that you can have that built out as it ties to one transaction. Probably not exactly the answer they're wanting, but I think that's a way to accomplish the goal within the application without having to do too much. And you could obviously customize it and customize the printing of it as well with due dates. The problem is your aging isn't going to be accurate if NetSuite's one invoice, one due date. So your aging would be inaccurate from an AR perspective. So.
All right, the next one comes from Sarah. Sarah, thank you for joining us today. Great to hear from you. Sarah asked Glenn, what's your experience with the assembly process within NetSuite? This is Sarah Altman.
What's that?
This is Sarah Altman from Pioneer.
Oh, hey, Sarah. Obviously there's a basic assembly build where we're just slapping the items together, creating a finished good. I know a lot of people want to keep it fairly simple, so they do use assembly builds to basically say what's going on the shop floor. You can allocate some service or overhead hours labor into that with a service item on that line item of we average $22 per hour plus $15 machine time for $37. Here's what that comes to. Secondarily, you can obviously go the route of work orders where you're tracking production time and things like that. And then further down the rabbit hole is whip routing. You're tracking the operational steps, the time it takes to produce that. You may be printing out documentation around how to do the building process and going down that. And then, you can get all the way down to manufacturing execution, rough cut capacity planning. One of the new features in NetSuite, and I'm going to be honest, I saw it, I have not dug into it, but they've added on the order itself, available to build. So basically a real-time look, and we've had, other systems can do capable to build, available to build, but it'll basically real-time peek into your inventory. And I'm assuming it's only looking at unallocated inventory, but I haven't done my due diligence, so please take that with a grain of salt. and it'll tell you what your available to build is for a given assembly product on the sales order line, which is really super helpful, particularly if you don't have manufacturing capacity constraints or timing constraints with getting material in and things like that. We have a lot of customers who kit or assemble like light assembly type stuff. And that's going to be an interesting use case for a lot of them. It'll also display on a sub tab after the transaction is saved what the available to build is, so you can see what the breakdown is of those inventory items. But yeah, I mean, for simple stuff, the assembly build is super easy to use. I took 10 of these, especially if you do backflush. I took 10 of these, I took 5 of these, and I created this one finished good product. But obviously, as you get more complicated in your manufacturing, there's a lot of other things to consider, like, quality assurance and manufacturing operational routing steps of the actual process it takes to build. And then are you over or under allocated from a resource perspective for what you are able to accomplish in that time period? And you can do that with manufacturing work centers. You can do, like I said, rough cut, high level, all the way down into each individual line and each process step within the manufacturing side. So kind of a broad overview. I hope that helps, Sarah. Always happy to hop on a call if you want to ask any questions or go deeper on that, of course. So.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And Sarah, if you have any follow-up questions, send them our way. Next one is regarding statistical schedules returning empty rows. So our team would like to create a dynamic allocation based on revenue generated by departments. In essence, certain expenses would be allocated to these departments based on the revenue they generated. So these are expenses shared by all departments. The ones that benefited the most from them or generated the most revenue are the ones that get bigger allocations.
Yeah, so I don't know why it would be returning blank rows, but the general process here is you create statistical accounts, you create a saved search that dynamically populates that. You have to post those statistical journal entries, and then you can reference it in your dynamic allocation that's based on percentage. A lot of people use headcount by department to allocate IT administrative costs into the departmental side. And it works. I don't know the specifics here, but it should work where you would create a statistical account for revenue by even percentages, like percent of revenue or whatever by department. And then you should be able to allocate that in based on the total. Again, I know that's not probably like I want my problem solved, but that is the process and that is what should work. And I have set that up many times for different customers. So if there's an issue or a question, we can certainly see about helping out with that.
Okay. All right. Next one, native approval routing email alerts. So hi, my company is using the native NetSuite approval routing feature for expense reports. We're making some adjustments to our processes and have found a shortfall of the native approval routing feature. When an expense report is pushed up the approval hierarchy to the next approver, they do not get an email notification. The only notification that gets sent is the initial email to the submitter's expense approver.
If it's updating the next approver on the record itself, which it should be, and when I hear native, there's a couple of different native. So, but as long as that record and you know who the next approver is, you can create a saved search that will dynamically send out emails when it's approved to the next approver in the flow. If you're on a saved search, it's what tab is it? I apologize. I should know this off my head, but I don't. So I'm going to look real quick. But on this saved search, there is a schedule tab, I believe it is. Let's see. And of course, my screen's going to freeze up now. There we go. But yes, there's a tab within there. Again, let that load, but that will let you basically, here's a better one. Sign me out. That's why. That will allow you to sign that under email. So send emails according to results, recipient from results. You can choose the next approver on the recipients from results, and it'll go out. I've used that feature for a couple of things in a previous life where there was potential conflict when I worked for an accounting firm to identify conflicted areas within the practice so that we could make sure we weren't overstepping what AICPA or whatever allows. So.
Okay. All right. Well, next question. This one's a tricky one. So payroll integration. So payroll integration in NetSuite, Bamboo HR, and Abacus. So hi team, anyone familiar with the best way of integrating payroll from systems like QuickBooks, Abacus into NetSuite, and then process the payments to employees? And
I was
Glenn,
muted. Sorry.
yes, you
I
were.
muted. Trying not to get the back. So most have standard mappings that you can utilize or templates that you can utilize to export for import into your system. We've done everything from, I know Bamboo they used to have, they were a preferred provider of HR for quite some time with NetSuite, but a native integration. I know we've done integrations with QuickBooks Payroll because we have had a lot of customers who move, and NetSuite Payroll can be a little tenuous, and people know QuickBooks. So definitely seen that. As far as the payments, because you have all the taxation and stuff, most of the time, I guess you're remitting on your own. So you're remitting back to the state, the federal on your own kind of in-house management. You should be able to just pay it via a standard employee payment within the application or just a vendor. No, I guess not. No. As far as the payment side, I'm not entirely sure there. Because most people let their
beyond
journal
entry.
Well, you can mark it to an individual, but then you have payroll information in your income statement potentially, which most people don't want. I don't have a good answer there. I'm sure a payment file could be generated, but my question back would be, why are you not letting your payroll provider pay on your behalf?
Right.
I'm sure there's a reason, whether it be the float. I hate that our payroll provider takes it like 5 days early, but it is what it is. And we don't have to remit all the taxes.
All right. Well, next one is on advanced SaaS metric requirements. So does anybody know what is required for advanced SaaS metrics to work properly with ARR? We are selling digital classes at a subscription level. Unfortunately, we've built a custom subscription record and do not use suite billing or software verticals. We have ARM. Since we're not using contracts or the standard subscription transaction, I'm worried we'll face problems trying to get advanced SaaS metrics to work properly.
Oh, I have good news for you. We utilize this. It does have some of its limitations, but overall it's pretty good. So there's a couple of ways you can actually load in your own information for contracts that may exist outside of NetSuite. It creates a record called SaaS contract transaction. If you're using sales orders, which is what we utilize for our contracts, it will take the revenue and the order type. You will need to make sure that this order type is mapped. And that is part of the software vertical, but I'm not entirely sure how that will translate. I think it creates it for you, but that is then what they use to determine renewal, upsell, downsell within that. But we utilize this. There are some limitations on how it looks at credit memos. It really only considers revenue. It doesn't consider if somebody cancels or somebody goes out of business midterm. So that's a caveat I'll give, but I use this. Well, you've seen it, Louis. You know, we use it for some of our metrics that we measure internally to, track ARR, track revenue, upsell, downsell in a given month. The other side is if you do a renewal, it'll consider churn and then an addition. So there are some nuances to understanding the data, because a customer that renews, it goes into churn and then back out, which is I don't particularly love, but it does keep accurate information in it at the very least.
All right, super helpful. Well, we've got 2 questions left. To our audience, if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask away, as we've got a couple of minutes left in our session. So next one is on period close checklist permission. So hi experts, is there a way in NetSuite to limit access to reopen prior periods? However, we need the role to still have the ability to work on the checklist. I'm thinking that full level access is required and it cannot be limited in any way.
I'm pretty sure that's I'm not 1000% sure, because to be fair, I don't do a lot in permissions. I usually ask somebody else to test that out these days. But I'm pretty sure if you have access to that function, that page, that screen, you have access to reopen periods. This would certainly be a good feature. I'm guessing NetSuite's mindset is that if you're giving them that sort of access, there's a reason or a process for them to reopen things. And also you can always track what was done after a given date. So you can see when periods are reopened, what changes were made in a period. So if somebody goes in and monkeys around with something they're not supposed to.
All right. We've got 1 question left. Again, if anybody has any others, please feel free with a couple of minutes left. So next one is on task scheduling conflict save search. Any ideas for building a save search that returns all overlapping tasks, events assigned to the same individual?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. You should be able to do this. And a normal save search to compare the different tasks where the data is the same. The difference is you're comparing one data set to another, so that may be a little tricky. You can also potentially do this in analytics workbook and create 2 different data sets with the task information and align it to say where the date and the time are equal to each other or between whatever, and the internal ID of the task, meaning it's a different task, is not the same. So you would basically create 2 structures, two different sets of data that are almost identical, but then compare them back to each other to say where the internal ID is different. So internal ID does not equal internal ID, which is kind of a case statement. So you would case when internal ID doesn't equal internal ID, but the date times overlap, and it'll give you a listing of all the overlapping times. I would certainly have to play with that to validate it, but that would be how I would approach it, just based off of a cursory look. I've dabbled quite a bit with the analytics workbook, as you know, Louis, with some of the stuff I create for us internally. So I've learned quite a bit on how to link the different data sets, compare the information, some of the things that you're limited to and what you can do in a save search. And then, of course, you can put that on your dashboard. You can create visualization. Although the visualization's pretty budget, as we all know, but it's better than nothing. So.
All right. Well, on that, just as a reminder to everybody, we'll be sharing this again. In 2 weeks, we're going to be having Avalara join us for the next LinkedIn Live to go through everything that's changing in the world of tariffs. So we plan I think that'll be very insightful, just in time for the European tariffs that are going to kick in at the beginning of April. So I think there's constant changes. I saw, the wine and champagne from yesterday to coffee looking for an exemption today. We got a lot going on. It'll be good to have them on to just share the myriad and the mess of what's happening, just so you can keep your finger on the pulse and make the most out of some experts in the field who paid the big bucks to make sure they're advising properly. So we're really excited for that. Glenn, thank you for spending some time going through the questions today. To our audience, remember, you don't have to do this alone. We at Nuage specialize in the implementation, post-go live support, and NetSuite optimization. We'd love to share with you a little bit more. And I think that's it. Glenn, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I'm glad I'm not the guy who has to talk about all the tax stuff. Those guys are way smarter than I am. But no, I appreciate everybody joining questions. And yeah, this is always fun to do. I enjoy hearing some of the challenges folks have and seeing if, how we can help, whether it be via this LinkedIn Live or connecting after. My big thing with our team is we're always here to help. That's what our goal is to help organizations make the most of their investment in the NetSuite ecosystem. And that's what we live for. So thanks for having me, Louis. As always, it's a pleasure.
All right. To our audience, thank you. Have a great day and a great weekend. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and we'll talk to you guys soon.